Hey, what is up YouTube? Kolst here, and here with a very special video because there was an arena tournament a couple weeks ago at this point. I'm kind of later than I was hoping to be making this video, but I know there were a lot of questions. There was an arena tournament, what's going on? This doesn't usually happen. So I wanted to make this video to explain kind of what the tournament is, gonna talk about the format and all that stuff, and also as I was the winner of the grand prize of $750, basically some of the strategy I had around the format. I'm not going to talk too much about like the in-game strategy. A lot of my runs are up on YouTube already. If you want to know, that stuff, you can watch those. Of course, I'm going to be linking some of those, but I just wanted to talk, about some of the stuff specifically because it's interesting to actually get to have this kind of a competitive environment around the arena because it doesn't happen very often. Blizzard does not ever really do tournaments with arena. I don't think they ever have. There have been like a couple of Twitch rivals, for example, years and years ago. But every time there's a tournament like this, it is community run. So that is a very cool thing. There are so many supportive people of the arena that we actually get to have these things every now and then. So with that, we'll start with the first point of that, which is what the heck was this tournament in the first place? The person who actually was in charge of doing everything, who spearheaded everything, is Cosmic Camel, who's involved with the arena Twitch community. The purpose of the tournament, partially, was to give back to the arena community or support the arena community, probably a more accurate way to put it, but also to raise awareness for the Amazon rainforest. And so honestly, I'm not informed enough to give like a long speech about that, but I will put a donation link in the description. You can also go there to just look at the website and learn about that if you choose to do so. But I will just add, I think they have like some kind of donation matching going on until the end of the year, so just something to be aware of. And Cosmic has actually done a handful of these tournaments. I believe this is the 6th one he's done, but this is the biggest one by both participants and prize pool that's been done. I believe the total prize pool, it's kind of piecemeal, but I believe it added up to over $2,500, all things considered. As I mentioned, the grand prize was $750, but it did spread throughout quite a lot of people. There were several ways to earn money. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But with that, let's talk about like how the actual format of the tournament was. There were actually several ways you could make money in this tournament. There were basically two separate main pieces. First of all, there was the actual competitive tournament aspect where there was a prelim and a finals, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But there are also these things called bounties, essentially kind of like Badlands bounties, kind of the theme of the expansion, but essentially these are kind of like achievements you could do that would actually separately earn you money. So even if you aren't trying to be one of the top win average players, you could still actually participate in those, and some of those were really cool. I believe most of those were $10 a piece, but there was actually one premium bounty, which was the ultimate prize for going 12 wins with Priest. And this was a 4-day tournament, by the way, and it was very close to no one actually getting that. This was back when Priest was like 34% win rate or something, like absolutely dreadful. So it was actually looking, and there were very good players trying. Obviously not the people who were actually in the main tournament, but there were still a lot of very good players trying to get that, and it took like until the very end of the 4th day basically for that to even get done. And I tried to go add up all the bounties, and I believe the bounties added up to over $500. I think the top bounty hunter, as you would call him, I think he had like $140 or something in prizes. So that was actually more than a lot of the finalists actually got. So hey, maybe the people in the finals weren't so smart after all. You could have just gone for bounties. But obviously the big prizes were in the finals because, as I mentioned, the top prize was $750, second prize $500, third prize $350, fourth place $250, and then anyone who made the finals automatically got $50. So in this case, if you actually got the 12-win Priest bounty, you got more than half of the finalists. And to be fair, at the time, with how bad Priest was, you could argue that getting a 12 with Priest was actually more impressive than reaching the finals of this tournament. And I could be wrong, but I do think this is the biggest arena tournament that has happened since like beginning of 2019, so almost 5 years ago. That was when the last Twitch Rivals was. And if you're interested in knowing the next time one of these tournaments happens, I don't have a link to the Discord or anything, but if you follow just really anyone involved on Twitch, including myself, and obviously I stream on YouTube too, so you can catch me here as well, but also anyone involved on Twitch, in the arena community, but also you can follow Cosmic himself. I'll include the link for his channel as well. So of course, if you're following really me or anyone else on Twitch, or you can subscribe here as well on YouTube, or you can join my Discord. I'll also link that, I guess. I'll make sure to make more noise this time. I didn't make too much noise going in this time because honestly I wasn't sure if I was even going to do it, but for reasons I'll talk about a little bit more later. But in any case, that was a very cool thing. But so for the rest of this, I'll just talk about like the actual competitive part of the tournament. Of course, what I participate in mainly myself. I didn't get any bounty money. As I mentioned before, there were 2 rounds. There were preliminary rounds and a finals. For the preliminary rounds, essentially you could do 2 or more runs, but you essentially had 3 runs to do, and your lowest score is dropped. If you just did 2 runs, then you didn't have a drop. Your third run is essentially dropped. The 8, or if there's a tie, more than 8, but 8 or close to 8 people with the highest average are going to qualify. And I believe there were like over 90 people that did participate. And you know, there is naturally a lot of variance in the arena. So everyone knew going in, you would need to have a very high average to actually qualify for the finals. And so there are a couple of things I went into the tournament understanding. Is that first of all, one thing is that you have to assume that you need to actually qualify off of your 3 runs. There were like 1 or 2 people that actually did manage to qualify with more runs, but it is very unlikely because you have to high roll to get the highest average. We thought going in, we probably thought that a 10 win average would be enough, but a 10 win average was not enough. We actually needed to have a 10.7 to actually qualify. Even a 10.5, like a 12 and a 9 was not good enough. I was fortunate that I managed to end up getting a 12 and a 10, so I had an 11 win average, so I was able to be above the bar. So it turned out you needed a 12 and a 10, or you needed to do more runs. I went in expecting, I think the thing that was clear is that most likely, like, you could have gotten to 11s theoretically, but you needed to have 1 run be a 12. You need to do 3 runs. 1 would be dropped, 1 would be a 12, and then the other one would also be a good run, which it turned out needed to be a 10. And even though we didn't think it would need to be that high, the thing that was very clear going in is that this is the first thing about this format, is that you have to get lucky, because you can't just go 12 every run. It doesn't matter how good you are in this game. You're going to have to be very good and very lucky to actually even make the finals in this tournament. And as I mentioned, actually, this was a big part of the reason I actually wasn't sure if I even wanted to participate in the first place. One of the reasons I actually did, though, is that I was looking at the qualifiers. I waited like a day or 2 to even do my qualifier runs, but I saw a lot of players I actually respect on the qualifier list. I believe I'll post the qualifiers as of when I started my runs, and this is a very stacked list of names. So seeing that there were so many guys that I do respect as players that were all very much at the top, I was like, okay, if these guys are all able to be this consistently, maybe I can too. Just so happened I had a very bad week that week in several ways, but including the game, and I ended up having to take I took like 3 or 4 days off from streaming, playing, period, just to de-tilt, but then came in ready for this tournament. And with that, before I went into the finals, as I mentioned, when you're actually in game, I mean, is not too much of a difference in how you're actually going to play in an individual game, because really every game you're just trying to win that one game, so it doesn't really change anything. But I will talk about the draft picks, just particularly the class picks, because that was one big thing. Because in general, again, as I mentioned, you're really trying to high roll specifically for the prelims. The class balance was not as good. It was reasonable, but it was not as good as it is like currently. So right back then, there were Hunter and Death Knight. Those were the clear number 1 and number 2 in the meta. And then there was like Warrior and Paladin, I believe. And then like Demon Hunter, Shaman, Druid were like okay. And then the other classes were just, you don't want to go anywhere near them. But specifically within those, there are 2 classes that are known for being very high roll, low roll. And those are Warrior and Druid. So those are classes that you're going to be eyeing on a little bit more in those prelim runs. In the first prelim run, I had Death Knight, Warrior, Demon Hunter, easy Death Knight, just because, again, it was one of the clearly best classes at the time. Don't believe I have this one on YouTube yet. I may end up posting it there, but it did go 10 wins, as I mentioned previously. The second qualifier run, I had Druid, Mage, and Shaman as my choices. So as I mentioned again, you could go Shaman for consistency, but I ended up choosing instead to go Druid for high roll. That did not work out very well. If you watched my last video where I posted that run, that was the worst run I had of the entire tournament. It had a Riastraza, but just unfortunate things happened. Certain things maybe could have worked out very differently. It was just unfortunate, kind of what can happen in Arena. And then for the third qualifier game, I got the choice of Rogue, Priest, and Demon Hunter. Unfortunately, it's an easy choice, but only because I have Rogue and Priest at the time as the two worst classes. So I didn't have a choice for Demon Hunter, and I low rolled the Legendary, by the way. This run is posted as well, and somehow I ran a miracle, and I needed 12 to actually qualify. And I actually got 12 with Demon Hunter is a very good class now, but it was not good at the time. So that was very shocking that I could low roll the Legendary. I don't think it was a crazy, like, super strong deck either. It's just, sometimes it works out. Sometimes you get screwed, like that Druid run, and sometimes things work out. And so this was a very interesting tournament in the qualifiers especially, because as I mentioned previously, people thought that 10 would be good enough, and it wasn't. I was actually I think I was the one that officially knocked out all the 10s. Or I don't remember exactly the timeline, but for a while people thought, okay, 10... It turned out 10 wouldn't be good enough, but 10.5 would. But then it turned out that 10.5 wasn't even good enough, and that caused, chaos, as there were a lot of people at 10.5 that unfortunately had to try, and only like maybe one or two of them were able to improve from 10.5, because then I think they could qualify with an 11 from there. But yeah, it was just chaos. At the end of all the chaos, though, there were 9 finalists. And so with that, of course, let's talk about the finals. So there was one big change up in the format for the finals. We had to do 3 runs yet again, but this time exactly 3 runs. And there was no dropped run. So as a result, that is a big deal, because unlike the prelims where you could afford a drop, you could go for a big risk and have something go disastrously wrong and still potentially qualify. One bad run, like really bad run, would pretty much knock you out of contention for all of the money, essentially. You were guaranteed $50 for being in the finals, as I mentioned earlier, but there's a big increase just for being top 4. It was much more important to value consistency in the finals. And so since we had 36 hours, I believe, for the finals, a lot of people chose to save all of their runs for the last day. I actually chose to do 1 run the first day, and then I did my last 2 runs the second day. Maybe I should have done 2 the first day, but a lot of people were probably holding it to try to see, how many wins they actually needed to get for, reasons. But that first run on that first day worked out great, because I ended up getting a 12 with my Paladin run, which, oh, by the way, I didn't mention as well. You actually needed to not pick the same class twice, so it's really good that I got a 12, but it was also really good that I did it without one of the top classes. So that was huge, and that put a lot of pressure, I think, on a lot of the other players. And it put me, of course, in a great situation. Because while we needed like close to an 11 win average to actually make the finals, it was pretty clear early on that if you had like an 8 win average over those 3 runs, that would be enough to probably put you into the top 4. So once I had that 12, I knew that I only needed 12 wins over the next 2 runs, like a 6 win average, for me to guarantee that I would be up in those higher prizes. Again, it's $250 for 4th, and then it goes up from there. And so I was feeling very good going into that second day. And as my second hero choice, I was able to actually get a Hunter, so that helped as well. Unfortunately, at that time, I had not had a lot of experience with Hunter. For some reason, it was just a lot of times there's just like one class you just don't see. I had practically no experience with Hunter, and Hunter has some weird tricks to know. And I think that led me to, I think I made some mistakes. I don't know how much it really made a difference, but yeah, it wasn't the greatest Hunter, and it only ended up going a 6, I believe. And thus it put me under a little more pressure than I wanted to be under for the last run. And the last run was when what it seemed like disaster had struck, because I think I forget exactly what the 3 choices were. I'll probably post it up, but the 2 that I was considering were Warlock and Mage. And I had essentially decided going in that I would value Warlock over Mage, just because of the consistency. All 3 of my choices were 3 out of the worst 4 classes according to win rates. But I did think at the time Warlock was underrated. Warlock now is one of the top classes, but that's due to a lot of balance changes. both constructed buffs, but also micro adjust arena specific balance changes. Back then, Warlock was thought to be completely terrible. And so I was very nervous that I wouldn't be able to get to the line where I would even get to 4th place, yet alone being able to go 1st place. But of course, I would leave the spoiler, but I posted this run already. I already talked about how I was the winner of the tournament, so it did end up working out well, very surprisingly again. But it was pretty amazing story-wise, where it's like I had a Demon Hunter as my 3rd run to actually qualify in the 1st place, which overperformed from what you would have expected, and then that Warlock run at the end as well to actually be able to win the final. So that made it very cool, being able to essentially win the tournament with 2 of the bad classes. A lot of people would have, everyone really thought that, just who would have the 12-win Hunters and Death Knights would actually be who would win the tournament, but it ended up not working out that way, so that was pretty cool. And of course, I think it's very cool because, of course, I was the one who was able to win the grand prize again of $750, so that. But with that, of course, I don't know, this is going to be probably like a 20-minute video or something. I think I've talked enough about this. Again, shout out to Cosmic, but also everyone who worked to put together the tournament and people who donated as well. Some of the prize pool was crowdfunded. A lot of it was, I do believe. Some of it came out of Cosmic's pocket himself. But yeah, shout out to them, and also shout out to everyone who donated to the Amazon Rainforest as well as part of the event. And of course, as I mentioned earlier in the video, if you're interested in this kind of a thing, either supporting it or participating, then keep an eye out on the way Cosmic's been doing it. It's been like every few months, so like maybe once an expansion cycle or every other expansion, so it might be a while, but just keep an eye out, be involved with the Twitch community and the YouTube community for Hearthstone Arena, and you'll definitely hear about it if you're, just hanging around there. So yeah, it would be very cool to see a lot of you guys participate in that as well. But yeah, I appreciate, of course, everyone hanging out in this video, and we will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.